Everybody save what you were working on in case we crash your computer while we're going through this. That would be just the worst way to start your academic career. So save whatever you were working on and then open a new Rhino file and choose a large object in inches. All right, from there we're going to start by making a box that we'll use as the base for a diagram. All right, so start by making a box. I'm going to type box, and because I'm in inches, I'm going to go to the origin. That'll be my start point. So I type 0, 0 in the command line, as you can see here. Hit enter, and I'm going to use all of the dimensions being 10 inches, so you can type 10, 10, 10. If you don't already have it set, go to View and go to Shaded. You can also do this by right-clicking on Perspective and switching to Shaded. With this object, I'm going to put that in the center of my zooming and panning. So I'm going to type ZS, which zooms into that selected object. I'm going to also have you guys create this list of layers. So we'll just take a minute to do that now. You create layer by either adding a layer and naming it, or by clicking on this here. So we want the layers to be default, massing, program, construction, and bounding box. Molly has gone over why we use layer management, but it's especially critical doing what we're doing now. We're going to be going into Illustrator, and it will maintain these layers. And then we'll be using those layers to make global changes to the layers, changing stroke, color, opacity, to create a comprehensive drawing that reads really clearly. So now that we have all of these layers, I'm going to take our origin box and I'm going to place it on the massing layer. You do that by selecting an object, or one way to do that. Right-clicking on the massing and say move object to this layer. I'm also going to create a copy of that object by clicking on it again, and I want it to go onto the program layer, so I right click onto the program layer and go copy object to this layer. I now have two boxes on different layers. I'm going to lock the massing layer. I don't need it right now, and now I have just a 10 by 10 by 10 box located on the program layer. And I'm going to use the scale 1D command, which you have maybe gone over, but maybe not. Basically, it functions by taking 2 points and compressing or expanding something within those points. If you've used SketchUp before, it's the push-pull command. I find this can be a really intuitive and easy for quick modeling, especially dumb modeling like we're doing where it's not exact. So I'm going to use that now. Scale 1D. It functions by selecting 2 points. So I'll select this top point and this point, and I'm going to shrink my box. You can do it by eye, you can select the midpoint, or you can type in a number. I know that my box is 10 inches, so I'm going to type 5, and now it's halfway. I'm going to do the command again, so I'm going to scale 1D. I will click this midpoint out here, and now I'm going to do 2 inches. So now I have this sliver of a box that's 2 inches. And I'll do it again so that it is 5 inches deep. I now have a small box that is a sliver. So to put this within an architectural context, you could think of this as a concept diagram where you're talking about the larger massing of a building, and then this is potentially an atrium or a stairway or some type of circulation that you're calling out as being different from the larger mass. Click copy object to layer. I'm going to lock the massing layer. I now have this thing to move around. I'm going to use the scale 1D command and click on an endpoint here. and any other point really. For ease, I'm going to click on this other point, and I'm just going to make it slightly smaller than the box that is containing it in 3 directions. I will then unlock my massing, and I'm going to use this to do a Boolean difference. And I don't know if you've covered Boolean differences yet, but it's basically taking one object and carving it away from another object. So with nothing selected, type Boolean difference, not Boolean, Boolean. It asks the surface that you want to subtract from. So that is going to be our massing, the big red box for me, whatever color it is for you. I hit enter. It asks the surface that you're going to subtract. So that's our little atrium or program piece. And make sure that you have the delete input unchecked. Otherwise it will delete your program box. And hit enter. And you now have a subtraction. If we were to delete this, you can see that we've removed that piece from the larger piece. Now that I have that object, I'm going to copy the program piece and paste it. So now I have 2 of them there, and if I were to click, it gives me the option to select either of them. I'm going to, using the beautiful innovation of gumball mode, I'm going to click on the blue arrow, allowing me to move this object in the Z direction, and I'll move it up 20 inches. So if I zoom out, you can see we now have these 2 pieces. While people get this, we're going to do a really simple thing, which is on the construction layer, so select your construction layer, we're going to draw lines between this new box floating above and it below. So just type line, and from each point, draw a line. So from this bottom corner, I want to go to that corner. These are just going to be construction lines showing that they relate. You can do it by drawing 4 lines, or if you like, you can copy, and it will ask you to copy from a point. Because they're all exactly the same length. All right, cool. So we're going to keep going then into the exporting to Illustrator part of the tutorial. So this will be the next 3 paragraphs or 4 paragraphs. We're going to want to control the view so that we have a view that we can use for exporting. I'm going to go to View, Set View, Isometric, and then Southeast I know is the view that I would like. You can also pull this up by right-clicking on your Perspective tab if you're in Windows, and going to Set View, Isometric, Southeast. We now have an isometric view that we're going to use to export into Illustrator. The same way that Molly has taught you, you select everything that you'd like to export and type export selected. Also, if you can't type like me, you can go edit, file, export selected. I'm going to save this to the desktop as diagram _01 and hit export. Then it asks for scale. Because we're working at a pretty small scale, I'm going to keep it at 1 inch is equal to 1 inch, but in your classes you'll probably be given an architectural scale that you can use. So 1 inch is equal to 1/8 of an inch, so 0.125, or 1/16 of an inch, or 64th, on and on. So you can type that in here. Type export. You can also, that will give us something we can edit in Illustrator. You can also do this as Molly's been teaching you by doing make 2D. So type make 2D. This gives you, instead of exporting solids, you can export the line work. So we want both visible and hidden lines. You just hidden, or source, and hidden, and then also maintain source layers. And I think it's really important to rename these as visible. Otherwise, you have this cumbersome tag that you can see here, which is make 2D visible tangent. I think it's helpful to just rename that as visible and hidden. So hit OK. Then navigating to top view by double clicking, you can see that 2D drawing that you've created. And just as a workflow tip that I think is really helpful for me is to group that, because the second you click on anything else, you will have to go in and select that. And unlike Illustrator, when you group something in Rhino, it doesn't change the layers. It keeps them all on their respective layers. I can now move that around. Another workflow tip I have is to, in the bounding box layer, select your object or your group and type bounding box. And that will give you a box around the parameter of your object that allows you to manipulate it in Illustrator. And maybe, I'm sure Molly mentioned this too, but another really important key thing is when you import this into Illustrator, it will reference where this is within this workspace. So it's important to move this to the origin. So I always just move from that edge to 0.00, which is the origin. And again, as we did before, you can do export selected. And I'm going to do diagram underscore 02. And going to maintain the scale again. All right, so everybody should have exported a Illustrator drawing of this diagram from a Make 2D version of it. All right, I've saved this as diagram 0 to my desktop. I will now open it. And I'm going to go really slowly through the Illustrator stuff because I know it's unfamiliar to some of you. I know half of you have worked in it before, but we'll just take it really slow. We're now on the 3rd page of the tutorial. So if you want to follow along, I'll just do one thing at a time, and you can always see what things I'm referencing. Basically, to move around is the simplest and most basic, and because we grew up with technology, maybe this will be fairly easy, but again, so this white piece is the artboard, and that's everything that you would print. Everything else is called the scratch space, or it's like your desk, where there's all of the clutter that you don't necessarily want to be on your perfect drawing, right? Let's see. To move around, you use the scroll wheel. So scrolling will move you up and down. If you were to hold Control or Command on a Mac, it will take you left and right. You can also hit H to give you a hand, and that will just pan around the page. You click, and it will pan around. Right? Everybody have a hand and it's like throwing their drawing around. Also, you can zoom in and out with Control or Command and the plus or minuses. So plus or minus, plus, and Control or Command 0 will take you to the artboard. So it'll zoom to that 11 by 17 that I was talking about. You can also do those commands in the View drop-down toolbar. Zoom in, zoom out, fit artboard to window. Actual size is a really good one. It will show you how big it will actually be when printed. Oh, both of them together? Okay. Okay. Cool. All right, so now we've zoomed in and out, we've moved around, we understand that this is the artboard and then this is the scratch over here. Now I'm going to teach you how to adjust that artboard, and the reason I had you make the bounding box is because we're going to use the bounding box to define our artboard. To do this, go to File, Document Setup, and then Edit Artboard. You can see there are other options here to adjust the page layout, but for now we just want to edit the artboard. There are a number of ways that you can edit the artboard. You can do it with parameters, so I can enter the numbers above at width and height. So I can make it 20 inches by 20 inches. I can use traditional printing standards, so it can be 8.5 by 11, 8.5 by 11. This will become helpful when you start plotting up in the computer lab. You can adjust it to the size of the plotter, so you can make it 40 inches by an infinite number. Yeah, 100 feet. You can also move the artboard around. I'm not going to do that. You can also click on the corners and adjust it manually. So I am now changing the size of the artboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the corner of the artboard to the corner of my bounding box. So I have that green bounding box around it. I'm going to drag this other corner to the bottom corner of my bounding box. And now all of my content fits perfectly on my artboard. Kind of. Yeah, of course. I'm adjusting the artboard by clicking on a corner or the anchor and moving it around. I'm going to move the two corners around so that they fit the bounding box I created in Rhino, that green rectangle around my drawing. And I'm going to give my piece of work a margin. So I'm going to add a dimension to the width and to the height. You do that by clicking in here in the toolbar, plus. So if you can see, I'm typing a plus, and then 2 inches, and it will scale equally in both directions. So it's going to give me an inch on each side. And I'm going to do that again for the height. So I'm going to go plus 2 inches, and it scaled it to give me a little bit of breathing room around my drawing. This is if I'm making a drawing that scale doesn't matter. And I'm creating something that will go into maybe an InDesign document, which I think you'll be learning about later, where you'll be able to control the size of it. We now have this one-to-one massive drawing. And I think the next thing we're going to go into is layers. But to get there, I'm going to talk about kind of the layout of the of Illustrator. So with Illustrator, you have a series of toolbars with tools on them. You can see on the left, I have a number of tools here. I also have a toolbar over here. And then a ribbon across the top that has information that changes based on what I'm doing. So I can change the stroke there, for instance. You can also go to Windows and see all of the tools that you have available to you. So I can use any number of these tools. If they're not already open, it will open it for you here. You can also save your workspace to be effective for whatever you're doing. So as an example, I have an automation workspace that I use when I'm doing automated work in Illustrator that I will maybe talk about towards the end. And this is toolbars that I've set up custom for this type of work that I'm doing. You can, for what we're doing, go to Essentials, Workspace Essentials. To create a new one, you simply go to New Workspace. If you've messed your workspace up beyond recognition and you want to reset it, just go to Reset, and it will take you back to the original workspace. Right. So if you don't know where the Layers toolbar is, you can go up to the Windows and go to Layers, and it will pull it out. It's this little icon over here if you're using Essentials. And by clicking on it, it will dock the toolbar. If you know you're going to be using it frequently and don't want it to keep closing on you, you can just drag it out. Now you have this little floating icon that will dock if you click on it. I'm going to leave it open, and I'm going to expand it so that I can really see what's going on. And this is where, if you have it coming in from Rhino and it's a really long title, like hidden construction, it can become kind of cumbersome to see all of that. So it's, I think, really important to keep your labels really accurately made. I'm going to organize these a little bit because right now I have hidden construction, hidden program, hidden massing, and I want to be able to select all of the hidden lines at the same time. So to do that, I'm going to click this little icon in the bottom right, New, and I'm going to title it Hidden. Then to move layers within this, I can go to Hidden Program and drag it up into the hidden, and it functions like a folder. All of the layers that I drag in there will now be located in there. So I'm going to take the hidden massing and put it in hidden. And the arrow kind of brings up the complexity of this. You have, within the layers toolbar, visibility. It's the little eyeball icon. So if we toggle that on and off, it will hide any of the line work that is located within that layer. You have next to it a blank square, which if you check locks it or unlocks it. So we can lock any of the line work the same way that you would in Rhino. You have a color, which allows for organization. So if you double click on this, you can change the color, which can correlate to organization within the page. I tend to organize mine like rainbow colors so that I know hierarchy of line weights. So red is in the front or foreground and is the thickest. Blue is section, on and on. You can rename these by double clicking. That's how I changed this to hidden. And then you can also use the target, which allows for selection. And so I want to target all of the selection or all of the hidden lines. I can click on this, and it gives you a little square next to the target, which shows you which things are selected. So if I were to click on the arrow to show all of the objects, you can see that both of those layers are selected and all of the paths are selected within that. So I can select an individual path if I wanted to. To do that, you pull down these two drop downs. I'm going to go to just this path and select it with the target, and I can now move that around using this square. So I can move it into hidden program. I can move it around over back into hidden massing. And just to kind of get familiar with it, I recommend just clicking somewhere on the page, pick a line, and then it will show you, for me, this line is in visible massing. And if you click the drop down, I see that it is the second to last path within that, just to see how things are organized. Any questions with just layer and layer organization and the toolbar? Cool, so I'm going to organize this in a way that allows me to make global changes. I have hidden already created. I'm going to create another layer called visible. And I'm going to put visible massing and visible program in there. And I'm going to create a third layer, which is construction lines, and I'm going to have both the hidden and visible construction lines in that same layer. Construction. And so both of those sets of construction lines are located there. We're not going to be using the bounding box, so I'm going to lock it and hide it. So I've clicked the eye and I've clicked the lock. I now have three things that I'll be editing that you can see: the hidden lines, the construction lines, and the visible lines. I'm going to be changing two things. I'm going to be changing the stroke and the color. So we'll do color first. Right now, they're whatever the layer in Rhino had the color. I'm going to select everything. And I want to use the color toolbar, but I don't know where it is. So I'm going to go to the window, color. I'm going to drag this out here so that I can work on it. And you'll note there's not really much information. With every toolbar, you can access additional information by clicking in the top right. There's this little icon. And I want to see show options, which gives me more options to adjust the colors. There are two things that you can adjust the color for. There's the fill, which is like a surface or the area between lines, and the stroke, which is the perimeter. And we have a line drawing, so right now the only thing that we can adjust is the stroke. So you can toggle between them. The fill is the larger square, which is behind or on the back or to the left of, and the fill, which is this. And when you click on it, you see there's a bunch of question marks, which shows that there's a number of different colors being used. I want to have there be a single color. I'm going to use black for now. So I will click on that. So this is selected, and then click on the black. My drawing is now made of only black lines. All right. Then we'll do the stroke. If you go to the, sorry, I don't have page numbers. Wow. First, second, third, fourth page. I have a couple of strokes listed just that you can see, but I'll be talking through them too. Again, to pull up stroke, you can go to Window until you know where everything is located. Window, Stroke. Stroke is the thickness of a line. And again, there's only one option right now, but if you go to the top right, Show Options, we now have a whole variety of options for editing the stroke of a line. We'll start with the visible lines. So to select all of the visible lines, you click on the target to the right of the visible line layer, and it will select all of the visible lines. And I want the stroke of that to be 2 points, so type 2. And you see it's a little darker now in this drawing, right? Then we're going to go to the hidden lines. Hidden lines, I'm going to use a dash line with a stroke of 1. So to give it a dash, you click on this little icon, which allows me to give a dash line, and you enter how long you want the dash to be, and then the gap between the dash, and then the dash again. So for the scale of our drawing, we'll do 12, 12, and we'll see how that looks. So now we have, zooming in, the hidden lines have this big dash pattern. Anybody have problems with that? Yeah. Yeah, so right here, if you can see this teeny little icon here, click on that and do Show Options. Okay. And every single toolbar has a list of options that you can enhance the amount of control you have for each thing. Everybody have that? Any other questions? The third thing we have is construction lines. Yeah, of course. Visible, I have visible program and visible massing. And the hidden, I have hidden massing, hidden program. And then I have the third being construction lines, which are both hidden and visible construction lines. Right, and so we'll do the construction lines. To select them, I use the target. I now have these 4 construction lines, or more, depending on how you drew them. I would like to use a different dash line. So again, I'm going to click on dash line, and we'll go 6 for the length, a gap of 3, and then a small dash of 2, and then a gap of 3, and it will repeat. That looks a little goofy. Here we go. So 6 and 3, and 2 and 3. So you get something like this. And I'm going to change the stroke down to 0.25. Everybody have that? Yeah. No questions? Great. Everybody good? All right. We're going to do one last thing to kind of get the image to pop. We're going to draw a profile line. So rather than importing Rhino geometry, we're now going to start adding our own line work. To do that, I'm going to create a new layer, put it on the top, and title it Profile. I will lock all of the other layers so that I don't accidentally mess them up while I'm working. And I'll be using one of the tools located on the toolbar now. I'm going to be using the pen tool. Also, you can just type P and it will give you the pen tool. And I'm going to be drawing with a stroke of 3. You can zoom in here. The beauty of the pen tool is it will show you what you're going to be referencing. So if I hover here, it says there's an anchor point or an end point, a control point, that I can click on. So it will snap to that. And I'm just going to trace, clicking on each of the corners of this object. You can hit enter or escape when you're done. And if I look at the stroke, it gives me kind of an ugly stroke. Make sure that this is not a dashed line. I now have a clean profile line around this object. What's nice about drawing this is it allows me to show you the difference between these two types of selections. So there's a selection tool, which is V, to kind of click something and drag it around. However, we drew a path which was made of a number of control points that went around the outside. If I wanted to edit any number of those individual control points that made up the line, I could type A, or it's this little white arrow, and it would allow me to click on any of those anchor points specifically, and now I can move that point around. So if you're doing nuanced line work or line editing, this helps you make specific adjustments. You can, moving this around, you can move it around by dragging it, like we did with the artboard. You can also edit the reference numbers that are given to it. So I could say plus 1 inch, and it would move it 1 inch at a time in the X direction, right? I can do minus 1y, minus 1. You can also move these points around with the arrows on your keyboard. So just by clicking, you can move things around. If you hit shift and click an arrow, it will move it an increment 10 times as large, I believe. I don't know that, Elliot. That's a little naive of me, but oh, I bet it's system design. I bet it's the grid, based on the grid parameters. But I'll check into that. So if I wanted to move the whole object, I would use V, and you see my arrow is black, and I can now drag this around. If I wanted to move an individual point, I would use A, click on the point. You can see that that point becomes black and the rest of them are all filled in with white, and now I can move that individual point. Using the pen tool, I'm going to draw a profile line around this as well. P for pen tool. Click on the anchor points to trace it. Here, note that I'm not clicking an anchor point, I'm clicking the intersection where a visible line goes behind another visible line, and it says intersection. Oh wow. and that you can hit, I think, Enter, Escape, or V to kind of move around. So now we have hidden lines, construction lines, visible lines, and a profile line around everything. The next thing we're going to do is adding color. So because we have, you can click on these profile lines, they're like a joined path where it's completely closed. You can add color to that, that's the fill. So pulling that up over here on the right side, there's color. I'm gonna do show options, just so I have those options again. Here I want to adjust the fill. I can make it any color and note it fills the entire path that I created. We were not able to do that with the rest of the Rhino line work that we generated because those are unconnected paths that don't meet at any point, and so you can't fill them in because they're not connected. To do that, Illustrator has come up with something called Live Paint, which allows you to fill the spaces between lines with color. I think it's a little like weird and a little glitchy, so I have a very specific workflow that I go through that I actually think is helpful because I'll teach you a lot of little tricks that are good to know in Illustrator. So just everybody make sure they're in the same place right now, and then we'll kind of go through this kind of quirky little workflow I have for Live Paint. Anybody need any help before we move on? So if you were to, I'll show you where Live Paint is, and I'll show you how it works, and then I'll tell you what's wrong with it. You don't have to follow along with this part, just kind of watch what I do. So I'm going to select all of these objects. I'm going to go to Object on the top toolbar, down to Live Paint, and then Make, and it creates an object in which everything is grouped together, and it allows you to fill in the spaces with color. What's really important to note is up here, it has put everything on one layer. So that little square shows where the objects are. They're all on the profile layer. So if I wanted to go back and edit line work, it would be much more difficult to do that now than if everything was on its individual layer. To deal with this in maybe an unelegant, sloppy way, but I copy everything and I paste it in its exact place and use that as a Live Paint layer that then I can delete or add information to as need be, but I still have everything to edit based on the layers that they're in. So to do that, right, everything is unlocked, and now you can follow along. We'll go through this together. So everything is unlocked, and I'm going to select everything. Note that over on the right, everything is on its respective layers. I'm going to copy. So for me, it's Control-C or Command-C. And then I'm going to paste special or paste in place. You can find that in the edit, and it's paste in place, or you can do it by Command or Control-Shift-V. Before you do this though, so if I were to do that, so Command-Shift-V, oh shoot, Command-Shift-V, it again is all on the profile layer for me. I want it to keep everything on its respective layer. So a really key piece of information I think for Illustrator is knowing that paste remember layers is on. So if I were to paste this into another file, it will keep all of the layer information that you have organized. So I'm going to go through that again. So I've selected everything. I've copied it. I want to make sure in my layers that I have paste remember layers on. And I'm going to do Object or Edit, Paste in Place. So now I have all of that line work pasted in one place. Now go Object, Live Paint, Make, and it will group it all together and becomes that object that you use for live painting. just for cleanliness, I'm going to make a new layer called Live Paint. And put this on there. I can now hide everything else and start painting this. Live Paint allows me to teach you guys something else, which is swatches. So rather than colors, which are either black, white, or somewhere in this rainbow, swatch is a saved color or a color palette that I've created, or a group of colors. And that can be found over on the right, and it looks like a grid that's 2 by 3. It's this little guy right here. Or you can also pull it up by Windows, swatches, right? We currently don't have any swatches created. You can create these in any number of ways, and this is actually a really good tool for group work. If you have a consistent color palette, you can share swatches with each other. You can generate swatches by using a color. So if I were to pull up the color palette, I can now save this as a new swatch and label it. You can also use libraries. So on the bottom left of the swatches, we can pull up art history, pattern, scientific. For this, I'm going to use art history and ancient, and it loads this grouping of colors that other people have created. Does everybody have that? Raise your hand if you don't. Yeah, of course. So it's window, swatches. Then within the swatches on the bottom left, there's the library. Here you're able to both save swatches or load them from other people. I'm going to use art history ancient. And when I click on that, this comes up. It's a collection of colors used by other people. Everybody have that now? Raise your hand if you don't. Cool. And then there's one last step, is to drag that folder of Egyptian colors, or click on it, and it will load up here into my swatches that I'm going to be using. Does anybody know the website Cooler? K-U-L-E-R? Yeah. So Cooler's great. It allows you to upload images, and then it will come up with color palettes from those images for you, and then you can use them for these presentations. When you do that, you save the color file onto your desktop, and the same way that we loaded that, you go to other libraries, and it will open up a window for you to search. You know, I would save it to my desktop or wherever my color folder is, my library folder, and you can load colors that way. You can also share colors with your classmates that way. Andrea, a question? So now that we have this ancient Egyptian color palette, we're going to use that to paint in our live paint. So click on your live paint object, and it will show you these like weird squares on the corner indicate that it's a live paint object. To paint, you have to type the key K. And it will bring up this paint bucket with a bunch of squares on the top. If they don't have any color in them, click on one of the swatches. And you notice that above the bucket there's 3 colors. If I were to hit left and right on my arrow command, it will change the color that I'm using to paint with based on that swatch grouping. So here I have a folder with 5 colors from blue to yellow. And as I push left and right, it will cycle through those colors, allowing me to paint. I'm going to use those to paint my geometry so that I understand what the massing is and how light plays off of that massing. And I'm going to use the 3 yellow colors to indicate the 3 different planes. So I have planes that are planar with this, and I'm going to paint them all this color. When you hover over an area between paths, it becomes red, and then when you click, it paints that. So everything that is visible and in plane, I'm going to have be the first yellow. On the side plane, I'm going to hit the right arrow, changing my color. And now all of these, on this plane, I'm going to paint this yellow. Right? don't forget these guys. And then everything on the top plane, I'm going to hit right again so that I have this color yellow, and I'll paint the third yellow. I was thinking about why you would use this rather than just using the pen tool to kind of, create the geometry. If it's simple geometry like this, I would probably use the pen tool. And it would allow me to fill in that object where the Rhino lines would not, or Elliot said I could make a compound path. But if you had something with a lot of curves or topography, this would be much easier because I wouldn't have to redraw every time it changes a direction. So you could have a lake bed where there are maybe 40,000 curves and you could fill it with blue in one click rather than clicking 40,000 times around the perimeter. So I think this is an ineffective use of the tool, but it allows us to understand what it could be used for. And now that we have it filled in with color is the kind of quirky part. It's created an object and a group. So you have to do two things. First, you have to expand the object so that it is vector information, and then you have to ungroup it. So both things are found under object. Go select on this live paint thing and go object, expand. So object expand. And this is at the bottom part of live paint, the note, in case you need to follow along or make notes. And it gives you options. I'm just going to do all three. You notice that everything is still a single group when you click on it. So ungroup, Control-Shift-G is ungroup, or object, ungroup here. And I now can select the individual objects, right? It's no longer a group. We're going to do something really simple just to get organized while they're getting caught up. I'm going to, within live paint, so here's my live paint layer. It has all of these different layers, paths within there. And you can see if you let it load that each path is a different geometry. I'm going to teach you the select tool as a way to organize this because right now it's a little chaotic. So I'm going to click on the top, right? So I've picked the darkest color. And if you go to select, you have a variety of options. I'm going to go same. I want to select things that are the same to that object. And I'm going to do appearance. You could also do fill and stroke. So it would be the same stroke and fill color, maybe just the same fill color. Or opacity. So right now it's just appearance. And you notice that it selects everything that is on the top, right? And if we were to go into the live paint layer, you can see that these objects are all highlighted by the target. I'm going to use group or Control or Command G, and it will put them on a small group that I can rename to top, right? I'm going to do the same for the front. So I'm going to go select, same, fill color. Gives me all of those front objects. I'm going to go Command G. It's grouped them. I can now label this front in the layers. And the side, select, same, fill color. I'm going to group that and have that be side. Everything else in this, all of the other objects within this or paths within this are just line work, so I can delete those out. And I now have just shades of color. Bringing back the line work, I'm going to put that, you'll notice that the live paint is on top of my line work. I'm going to move that down, and the order shows that what is in front of or behind. You can also do this with the, never mind, I won't get into that, but now that the live pane is located on the bottom, all of the line work is on top of it. If you use the target tool, we can lower the opacity, or how transparent that is, up on the ribbon. I'm going to make it 25%. Now it just really subtly shows that these are different surfaces within on an object, but the focus is still the line work or construction lines. All right, any questions on Live Paint before we go to image tracing? No? Nobody? Had anybody used Live Paint before? Does anybody have any tips for live painting that I overlooked? Elliot? Nobody?
What is live? Are you recording this?
Yeah.
I'll figure it out.
Has anybody done image tracing before using Illustrator? Molly, yay. One person, two people? Image tracing is one of the most helpful things that was covered when I was coming in as a first-year student. And I think it's really helpful because it helps understand the difference between vector and raster, but it also helps kind of spice up your architectural work or your style in a less stiff way than this. You'll kind of see as I describe it. But what it does is it takes an image, a photograph that is raster-based or made out of pixels, and it makes it into a vector image that you can adjust the fill, the opacity, any of that information. And I'm going to use it to put figures in this drawing, or we are together. So go to the internet and search for watercolor people. You could also search for like value drawings of people or like hand drawings of people, or it's best if you scan your own drawings and develop your own library of like maybe like charcoal hand drawings. But I'm going to go to images, and I really like this guy in the yellow shirt. So I'm going to download this image to my desktop and make sure to save it as watercolor people. Just while everybody's downloading, a review of what raster is. Raster is what photo, yeah. Oh, does anybody know? Really? Raise your hand. Anybody? Oh. What's the difference between vector and raster? Does anybody know? Yeah, tell us. Yeah. Yeah, what about vectors? Everyone should know. Have you guys gotten over this, Molly?
Yeah, but repetition is great.
Okay. Just to show you, this is a Photoshop image which is based out of pixels, and I can edit each of these individually, and it has information, it has a location, and it also has a color value, but it is not dynamic. Whereas a vector is an algorithm that defines the location of things. And so the difference is this is made up of control points, and those control points define the line. So they control the location of the line using an algorithm, whereas this is just a point. And the difference is an image that looks like this, or an image that looks like this. We're going to take a raster image or a Photoshop-based, pixel-based image and make it into a vector image. So raise your hand if you don't have a watercolor person downloaded yet. All right, cool. This should be pretty easy. In layers, we're going to create a new layer that is people. I'm going to go File, Place, So the toolbar file on the top, place, or Control-Shift-P, Command-Shift-P on a Mac, and select that watercolor people that we downloaded. And I'm going to put it over in the scratch, so on the gray. When you select that image, there on the ribbon becomes a number of options. One of them is image trace. It's located right here. Can you see that? Otherwise, you can find it in objects, image trace, make. If I were to go to do make, it will give us something like this, but we want to have a little more control over the nuance of how it's translating that raster image into a vector image. So next to image trace, there's a little down arrow. Click on that, and there are a number of options that define how it converts it. And I encourage you to come up with your own custom ways of translating information based on maybe your own hand drawing. For this, I'm just going to use 3 colors. And you see that it has translated that into 3 colors, white, like a beige, and then a dark beige. Yeah, go ahead. I think it's like 4. CS4. Oh, really? I don't think it's in the ribbon, but go to Objects.
It's not on the object.
It's not, okay. I might be wrong. It might have come in 5.
Trace?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they've just changed the name for it.
Okay.
Thank you for that question. And I'm not satisfied with this, so I'm going to do undo, and I'm going to go back to image trace 16 colors. So instead of those 3 muted beige colors, I'm hoping it will be a little more vibrant. Again, this is much better. It kind of has some of the quality of the watercolor that I like. It's quirky the same way that the live paint is, in that it creates an object that we both need to expand and ungroup. So once you've done the image trace or live trace, you need to go to Object, Expand. And when you click on it, it's a grouped conglomerate, so ungroup it. I can now select individual pieces that are like large vector paths with fill. So we drew our own, but this is like based on an algorithm translated in as 16 colors. So I'm going to select this white and do select same fill color and delete it out. I'm going to do the same with the beige, select same fill color and delete it out. And that's all I'm going to do. You can spend a lot of time adjusting these to be perfect, but really I want just an abstract form. So I'm going to now select all of the paths that make up this guy and group them and drag them over my image. You can adjust it to add opacity on the top. So I'm going to add some opacity, maybe 50%. And you can scale it using the points located around the object. So I'm going to click on this one, and you can see that it distorts it. So if you hold shift, it will scale it in a normal way, in a maintaining its aspect ratio. Yeah. What were you going to say? Uniform. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to make this guy much smaller and place him in my drawing. All of the rest of this in the scratch I will delete out. And then another little trick, so now you know how to scale things uniformly. Another trick is if I wanted to copy him, I can copy objects that are drawn by pressing Alt and then clicking and then dragging. And if I want to do it in a straight line, you can also hold Shift. So now I'm holding Alt and Shift and clicking. But I can drag him straight up so that you can see that this space in my diagram is this space down here in the massing model. Anybody have questions about those steps? Yeah.
If you do alt, click, and then drag for just
Yes. Yeah. For anything. So just to show you artboards again, backtracking all the way to the beginning, but is Control Command Option. You can do that with artboards as well. So I can hold Alt and drag, and I have a copy of the entire drawing. So maybe I was iterating on this specific drawing and I wanted to save a previous version while working on maybe a different opacity. I can now change the opacity of these three groups to be lighter, and then you can compare between drawings what your preference is. So that trick works for any of these things. Image trace. All right. Is it okay if we go a little over? Okay. I'm gonna do one more like kind of tricky, finicky thing, and then open it up for questions. The last thing is clipping masks and compound paths. So within InDesign, you guys, what have you learned? So you haven't learned InDesign yet, right? Just Rhino? Okay. With different programs, there's different ways to edit information you're able to see. We just deleted out a bunch of information from that watercolor, but say I wanted to have a little window showing just the face of the man in the watercolor drawing, I would use a clipping mask. It's essentially a window that you're able to perceive information behind it without seeing anything that I don't want to, any peripheral information. I'm going to show you that by opening up the watercolor image again. So go File, Place, and drop down your watercolor image here. Essentially, a clipping mask would be a little window that allows me only to see this woman right here. So to do that, I'm going to make a rectangle. Over here, it's the rectangle tool, or if you want a quick key, it's M. And I'm going to just draw it. You place one corner and then you draw the other corner. And right now, it has a fill. So if I go to color, I can change that to having no color. It's the white with a red cross through it or a red line through it. Another trick is if you wanted a regular shaped rectangle, hit M. And if you just click with any of these tools, it allows you to enter parameters into a command line essentially. So say I want 6 inches by 6 inches. I now have a 6-inch by 6-inch rectangle. Going back to this window over this woman, if I were to select the window and the thing I want to see behind it and hit Control or Command 7, it will isolate just what you're seeing beyond. Another way to do that is Object, Clipping Mask, Make, right? You maintain the ability to edit information within a clipping mask, but to do so you have to double click on it and it will go into what's called an, I don't know what isolation mode means, but it allows you to move this. So say I wanted to focus on this other woman, or I wanted to change line work or line weight, I would be able to do that. Was everybody able to do this little bit? Raise your hand if you couldn't. Oh, yeah, okay, that's a good point. So she was making her rectangle. Okay. So if you have the rectangle tool selected, everything that you click, it wants to make a rectangle. Hit V to get back to the selection tool, and use that to select both objects. I'm going to explain some of the fussy things about this. So up in my little people, you see I have a rectangle. It's called rectangle, and linked file, that's my image. When you make a clipping mask, the window has to be on top of the things that you're seeing behind. And by on top of, I mean in order. So if the rectangle is below the linked file, it doesn't work. Can't make clipping mask. The top selected object must be a path. So if we were to make a clipping mask of line work, the path on the top is the one that you will be seeing through. That's just important to know. If, let's see, you can simply move that rectangle up and down in the order. You can also adjust the organization of this list using Command or Control and the squiggly arrow, the brackets, if you will. So you can see it moving up and down in line over here. I know the rectangle has to be in the front. Is that clear? Kind of, no? Yeah, go ahead.
Does it still have to be on the same layer, or can you have that rectangle?
They have to be on the same layer. And one trick I have to make that really easy is it doesn't matter what layer they are if you grab both of them and group them, because it will put them onto the same layer. And then find that group over here and hit go Object, Live Trace, Make. Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you, Elliot. Well, maybe it doesn't like me. But yes, they need to be on the same layer. Right, was everybody able to successfully make a clipping mask? Raise your hand if you weren't, because it's like a powerful but easy thing.
What was the
I believe for Windows it's Control 7. For Mac it's Command 7.
Clipping mask order of operations.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really easy if you just think about it as putting a window on top of something that you want to see beyond. The thing has to be behind the window to be able to see it. Clipping masks also, if you're bringing in other people's PDFs, are something to be conscious of. So you can open PDFs, other people's PDFs with Illustrator. A lot of times it will, through the printing process, have a bunch of clipping masks on it. And if you wanted to edit specific information, you need to release their clipping masks. So it's great to know the shortcut to release clipping mask, which under Object, go clipping mask. Object. Release, or I believe for Mac it's Command Option 7. And if you open somebody else's PDF and say you want their site plan and it's in the back, you may have to remove like 100 clipping masks before you can get to it. Anyways, it's just worth knowing because that can be quite frustrating.
I think the other interesting thing about Illustrator and getting people's files and working with other people's work is that you just can be on top of groups, can be on top of groups. So oftentimes you think you're releasing a clipping mask or you're ungrouping something, and then it turns out that it's a group within 6 more groups. So
Yeah.
many times, and this happens in Rhino also with groups,
Yeah.
many times you need to remove something at the end of the time. Don't worry, you're not crazy.
You might end up crazy. I'm going to show you another thing as a way to introduce compound paths, and then maybe if Elliot knows anything about them, we can talk a little more. Say I'm going to release the clipping mask here. Great, so I no longer have a clipping mask. Imagine I wanted to, with this one image, have multiple clipping masks So I want to see both this girl in purple and I want to see the girl in blue. If you were to draw two rectangles, right, rectangle, rectangle, and linked file, it will only do a clipping mask through one of them. However, you can make a compound path, which is to say Illustrator thinks that they are the same path even though they're disconnected in space. So I will click on both of these paths and go Object, Compound Path, Make. And now it thinks that they're a single object even though they're not connected, which would otherwise be impossible. And I can now select this and make a clipping mask that allows me to see through two portals or two windows, if you will. I don't really know the benefit of doing this as far as making clipping masks, but it's important to know that compound paths come in. And specifically when working in Grasshopper, which uses ordered lists, so every chair that you make has 4 legs, and each of those legs will come in as a compound path. And so if you click one leg, it will select all of the legs, all of the first leg for every chair. And unless you know that you need to release the compound path for that, you won't be able to edit individual legs. Have either of you ever used compound paths for something beyond what I know?
Can you make a compound path out of line segments? So,
Yeah.
So then can the compound path have that fill?
Oh, I don't know that, Elliot. Here, I'll try. If you use the slash command, it's a line segment. So you have the pen tool, but if you wanted just a little segment, you can use the slash. Elliot is going to try an experiment with me. Object, compound path, make, fill, color, no. I'm going to show you a few other things that I'm not going to explain in any extent other than to address what they are and how you can find them. But they're actions, which if you're repeating the same thing over and over, for instance, moving something 1.125 inches or scaling something by 0.25, you can use the actions command or toolbar, so actions, and it looks like this. Basically, you have some preloaded, some of these are my own. You create a new one the same way you would create a new layer. And I'm going to say rotate 30 degrees. What it asks you to do is basically record a small video of your actions or like a list of commands. So it now currently is recording. So I will click on this object and go object or edit. What do I want to do? I'm going to open up the transform. I'm going to rotate it 30 degrees and hit enter. And then I will stop this little video that is recording. Now every time I click an object and push play, it will rotate it 30 degrees, right? Which can be really nice if you're doing like really mundane tasks over and over again. This is also used for like generating images. So say I wanted to do the same thing, except new, I'm going to do copy rotate 30 degrees. So I'm going to copy that, edit, paste in place. Now I'm going to rotate it 30 degrees. Okay, stop it. Now play. I've started to repeat the action over and over again. I think actions can be really powerful, and it depends on how you start to use Illustrator. It's really important to kind of observe what patterns you fall into when you're doing your work, and then you can use actions to kind of shortcut those things that you're wasting time doing.
I also look at Photoshop.
Yeah, that blew my mind. There's also the blend tool. I think it's less useful than actions, but I'm sure you can find creative opportunities for it. So it's located over here. It's the blend tool, or W. You click on it. It will ask you for two objects, so click them in sequence, 1, 2, and it will come up with all of the geometry with steps between those two things. If you double click on it, it will do either smooth or stepped, specify steps, so maybe 10 steps. Now I have 10 objects that are blending the difference between those two things. Again, this is an object, so you would need to expand and ungroup it. A really helpful thing is the eyedropper for coming up with colors. So say I wanted this to match the same color, I would take any color that's being selected and change the color for you. And cut. I didn't make it to, I think, everything on your list, Andrea and Molly, so if there's anything else you guys want me to talk about, I can try.
You're saying you could get your own library for color swatches?
Yeah.
So, one of those watercolor people, how would you pick up the color?
So you'll use the, I can't show you now, but I'll do it for the video, and I'll just talk you through what's happening and you guys can do it. So if you have that image, file place, we have that watercolor image placed on our scratch space. You would use the eyedropper, so we'll try that. So go I for eyedropper. I'm going to select that mustard yellow shirt that I was attracted to, and it will pull it up in the color tab on the right. And it shows you the percentages of green, red, and yellow. If you were to go to swatches instead of colors, so that is under window swatches, or on the right side, it looks like a grid, 2x6. You can then go to, on the bottom right, it says new swatches. It's right by the trash can. And I can label this yellow shirt. And I now have a new swatch called yellow shirt. I would do that for each of the colors I wanted to create. Then in the bottom left, there's the swatch library thing where we found that swatch. You can save and make sure you save it somewhere that you know. So I'm going to do my desktop, say yellow shirt swatch. And now I can email that to any of my classmates. Again, you should check out Cooler, which I think interfaces with Illustrator now, but you can also go to their website, Kuler. And so I'll use, depending on the project, a site photo of like a brick wall with like a vine on it or something, and you drag that into, on the Cooler website. Yeah, right? On the top left, there's a photo icon, and it allows you to load a photo. So then you can drag that in and pull color swatches from that, and then save them as .ai files. Yeah, go ahead.
There's also a really cool Cooler app. You can do it in the mobile.
Cool. Not supposed to be a joke.
It's a way more convenient.
Yeah, that's really nice. You can also look at other people's color palettes. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to collaborate between people. Other things?